Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Sam Menzi, and we have a great show for you today. First topic we'll be covering is the Ezequiel Tovar extension with the Colorado Rockies. After that, we'll be covering some recent Philadelphia Phillies news and just what's surrounding the team. After that, we will be talking about the Shohei Ohtani situation with his translator and just some updates on that. And finally, we'll be talking about some general news around the league. So now, before we do that, I'd like to ask you to please like and follow the show. We do get a number of questions from viewers, so to ensure that your question does get run in the air, please use the link gsmcpodcast.net. It really does help the show, and it really does mean a lot, so thank you so much for that. All right, let's get straight into the show. Now, before we talk, I want to say, yes, I did accidentally press the graphics part before my intro video. That's why I look surprised when you could see my face, so I apologize about that if you were watching on stream. I will be cutting that out of the audio version, so it won't be there for people to see, just me saying "oh" very audibly. So sorry about that if you are watching on screen. But so let's get into our first segment. As I said, I just wanted to give a little prequel of that quickly, which is going to be about, surprisingly, the Colorado Rockies. We don't really get much Rockies news on this channel or in baseball in general, so it's kind of fun we get to talk about them. It's not really a normal topic because, again, the Rockies don't do much usually. They're not that good, and they're kind of irrelevant nowadays, so it's nice to be able to talk about them. So, obviously, over the weekend, they extended Ezequiel Tovar, their shortstop, to a 7-year contract. It was 7 years, $63.5 million with a club option. We're not sure the exact specifics of the deal, or specifically the club option. Hector Gomez, who is a interesting Hispanic baseball reporter, he reported that it was 8 years, 84, so that could be where the 84 comes from. The club option could be around 11 million or something like that. We're not sure yet, but we know it's 7 years, 63.5 with the club option for Ezequiel Tovar and the Colorado Rockies. Tovar's stats throughout this year, he had, for last year's first full year in the big leagues, he had a 695 OPS, 15 home runs, but also with that, he did play great defense. So, my general thoughts on the deal are that I really like it. Now, Tovar isn't a perfect player by any stretch of the imagination. Of course, his OPS wasn't even 700 going into the year. He was a pretty well below average hitter. But he did show some flash, what I like. 15 home runs is nice for a shortstop, especially a young one. A guy who's just coming up like him, who's becoming a guy in this league who's trying to find his way. So I don't think 15 homers is anything to look at and just think, he's just kind of a bum. So I think that's a good starting point for him. I think he was always not really known for his defense. He was mainly offense. He was mainly a guy who was known for his defense, and the offense would come second. And I think the Rockies knew this when making him the starting shortstop last year, and I think they know this now when they did extend him. So I do like the deal. I think 7 years, 63.5 is a really good deal. I think they know what they're getting. They're getting a guy who's going to be a little bit below average to average hitter, but also plays great defense, had great defensive run saves metrics, had great outs above average. When looking at his defensive profile, has a good arm, has good speed. So I think Tovar is a defense for a shortstop, and the hitting comes after, but is still a good player, and I think the price you're getting him at, extending him for a young player, is good, and I think there is some stuff still left in the tank for him. I think he can still develop. I mean, I'm kind of talking about this guy like he's a 32-year-old veteran who's been in the league for 10 years. No, he's a really young guy. He's a young kid, a young shortstop who I think has a lot of potential. Was a top prospect in baseball for a few years for a reason. And I think this is a guy who is just going to keep going up. Do I think he's going to be an extraordinary shortstop at any point in this league? No. I think he'll be okay. I think he'll be fine, but I don't think he's going to be extraordinary or anything like that. So overall, I do like the deal for the Rockies. I think there are some risks that, of course, because if Tovar's offense just never develops, he just becomes a guy who kind of has an 80 OPS plus his entire career. That's really not something you want. It's not horrible because you are extending him at a lower price, and they always have the defense to rely on. His ceiling is always going to be relatively high as a player because of the defense, but you obviously want that. You obviously want that the offense to develop, that bat to develop, and extending him at this younger of an age, I think that is something you want to happen, and that is something you're planning on happening. I don't think they're planning on Tovar being a 120, 125 guy who, for WRC plus, for OPS plus, and being an all-star every year. But I think they want a really solid guy at shortstop to help get that position down, keep that position there, have a franchise guy, quote unquote, there. And I think it is possible for Tovar to become that guy. And I'm really looking forward to watching him progress with this Rockies team throughout the years. So overall, again, I think my thoughts on this deal are, I think it's a good deal, and I think it was a great job by the Rockies. Now, next in my notes here, I have Rockies doing something good, question mark. That tells you what you need to know about the Rockies franchise. So they made a lot of bad decisions over the past few years, but I think this is one of their better ones in a long, long time. I think Tovar's a good young player. I think he has a relatively high ceiling, a high floor, because of his defense and because the bat is going to keep progressing. So overall, a good move by the Rockies, and I think it was nicely done, and I think it was a good job by them. And I think another thing is the Rockies, for the first time in a long time with this franchise, you're seeing a core develop. You're seeing players that are coming up through this team or are with this organization right now, and you're thinking, okay, you know what? I could see these guys being on this team in 5 to 10 years, being a real contributor, being someone who's a really, really good player. And I think that's something really exciting for Rockies fans, something they haven't had in a long, long time, maybe since the days of Arenado coming up, Trevor Story coming up, a guy like Kyle Freeland coming up who's still on the team but kind of didn't really work out as a prospect for the Rockies. So I think that's another thing that's really exciting if you are a Rockies fan. You're seeing these things. You're seeing players coming up that you think could potentially be part of your core for a little while. Right now, I would look at Luis Montero, who was one of the big parts of the Arenado trade. Obviously, they lost that trade, but I think he should still be a pretty solid player whenever they find a position for him. Michael Toglia, a guy who's kind of struggled since coming up to the big leagues, but I think still has some nice hit tool, can be a solid first baseman in this league, and I think he is going to be a guy you look there at the future. Brendan Rodgers, a guy who's done really, really well these past few years, become a really, really nice second baseman over there. The hitting's kind of developed in a way I thought it never would. I mean, he's been really good. I think his defense really nice as well, so overall, I think Brendan Rodgers is a really good player, another guy you can look to build around on this team. So I think that's another thing you look for that's exciting. I mean, this guy last year, he had a 709 OPS. Before that, 733, 798. So he's done really well, and I never thought his offense would progress to that point. And I'm really excited that it has, and it's a very welcome surprise, I'd say. After that, we got Ryan McMahon, who they extended last year. He's really, really good. I think he has great lefty power. I think this is a guy who can be a cornerstone of the infield for a long time. Kind of struggled a little bit last year, but overall I think he's really good. And I think he is a guy that the Rockies can build around, and you'll see for a while there in the Rockies. Nolan Jones, this guy's a stud. Was a top prospect with Cleveland for a long time. They kind of gave up on him for no reason, traded him to Colorado for basically nothing. And he broke out last year. Was really, really good. Hitting tool finally developed, was really, really nice, and was doing really, really well. So I think these guys in the major leagues right now, these are guys that are going to be part of this Rockies core for a long time. You can see progressing with the team. So I think that's something exciting to watch. Looking at their prospects right now, they have a lot of good prospects, actually. First of all, Adel Amador, who's a guy I talked about a few times on the show as well. A guy I think is probably going to be a second baseman when he comes up. I think him and Tovar will make a really good double play combo for a long time. I think he can be up towards the later part of this year. I think his hitting tool is really nice. I think he plays good defense. I think he's really raw, but overall I think he is going to be able to develop, and I think he is going to be a really, really good player in this league for a long time. This is a guy I'm really excited for. I would be excited for if I was a Rockies fan as well. So I think this is a guy that I'm looking towards as a guy who can potentially be part of the Rockies team going forward, part of their organization going forward. So I'd be really excited about him if I was a Rockies fan. After that, we got Chase Dollander, their top pitching prospect and their first-round pick from last year's draft, I should say. Chase Dollander was a guy I thought was going to get picked earlier, but kind of fell for some injury reasons and some slot reasons as well. Rockies picked him up. I thought it was really nice. Now, of course, with a pitching prospect in Coors, you have to talk about it being Coors, him pitching in Colorado with the altitude. We all know this already about Colorado. I'm not saying anything too crazy. So I think that's something you have to watch if you are having a top prospect with the Colorado Rockies. But I think Dollander's really good. I think he's a nice fastball, good off-speed pitches. I think this is a guy that really can develop. I think if he can tailor his strengths towards Colorado, towards the altitude there, I think he can be a really, really good pitcher and a guy who's going to be very successful for the Rockies going forward. So that's something I'd watch here if I was a fan of baseball and watching him and how he does develop. After that, we have Ezequiel Fernandez, a outfielder prospect for them, a guy who's risen up the ranks in the past few years, has really nice power, has a great arm, is good at fielding, and I think could be a really good player for the Rockies going forward. More of a corner guy, but I think has great power. I think once he develops his overall hit tool, can be a really, really good player in this league for a long time. So that's another guy I'm watching. Jordan Beck is another guy I think can be really, really good. Just won spring training MVP for this team. I think he has great power, good defense as well. Overall, I think is a guy that is going to be up relatively soon. They have his ETA right now at 2025, but I think he could be up sooner if everything does play right. I think if everything falls right as well, I think he could be up soon. So overall, I'd be excited if I was a Rockies fan, and I'd be hopeful about your future going forward, which is something that I don't think they've had. I don't think they've had those thoughts for a long time now. I mean, this franchise just made mistakes after mistake. First of all, you traded Arenado, then you didn't get anything back for Trevor Story. I don't think that was a huge deal because you did get a compensatory pick, but still, I think you probably should have traded him before that as well. As I mentioned, the Arenado trade, but also signing Chris Bryant, which I think everyone knew from the start would be a pretty big disaster, and it has been. I mean, he's just been so bad. It's just I thought he'd be bad, but I did not think he'd be that bad. So just nothing's really going right now for the Rockies and their franchise. So I think it's nice for them to finally have some things to look forward to, some players to look forward to, some guys you can point at and say, you know what, I'm going to be watching these guys in 5 to 10 years. They're going to be on my team, and they're going to be playing really, really well. So again, I think that's something really exciting for Rockies fans and something they should be looking forward to. Now, just going over an overview of the team, I don't think they're going to be good. But I don't think me saying that is saying anything too crazy or saying something that's going to make Rockies fans want to fight me or something. We know they're not going to be that good. They don't have a lot of pieces, specifically the pitching. It's hard to have pitching in cores, but I think they've done it in the past. Once German Marquez and Kyle Freeland get healthy, I think that could potentially be a big help to your rotation. But we know they're not going to be good. But as I've just said overall this whole segment, that the one thing we can see with them is that they have pieces. They have guys that are there, that are going to develop with this team, that are going to be up soon, that are going to be big parts of this organization for the future. And that's something that I think is really exciting to Rockies fans, something they should be excited about, and something I think is worthwhile to watch and continue watching with this team. So I like the Tovar extension. I like what's going on with the Rockies right now and for the future. I know I made fun of them a lot over this show, and I still don't think they're a great organization, but they're building something right now. Even though it might not be the best, I think it is something. And them having some kind of direction and some kind of vision, I think, is a good sign for the future and something that hasn't been there for a long time as a Rockies fan and as a guy personally for me, as someone who's watched the Rockies over these past few years and kind of watched their entire franchise fall apart in some ways. So excited about that and good for the Rockies. So that was our first segment here. We're going to move on to our second segment after this, which is going to be about the Phillies and some recent news that happened over the weekend with them. So that'll be exciting to talk about and something I am interested to talk about. So we're going over that, but first we're going to a break, and then we'll be talking about it. So thanks, and see you then. Bye.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. A sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. A sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, we are back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, bringing you our second segment. But before we do that and go back to it, I would like to ask you again to please like and follow the show. And we do get a number of questions from viewers, so to ensure the question does get read in the air, please use the link gsmcpodcast.net. It really does help the show, and it really does mean a lot. So thank you so much for that, and let's get back into the show here. So we're talking about our second segment, which is going to be talking about my favorite team, of course, the Philadelphia Phillies. That's a joke. I don't really like the Phillies, but we'll be talking about them, and believe me, I'll be keeping my bias aside. Don't you worry. I think a lot of people have come to like the Phillies over the past few years because of their playoffs and their environment. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, they were kind of a team that not a lot of people liked, but I think when a newer generation of baseball fans, a lot of people have started to like them because their playoff atmospheres are so electric. Their stadium's beautiful. They have such fun players, guys who just hit home runs. So they become a really fun team. But just going off of that, I don't know why I really went into that kind of spiel there, but going on to our second segment here about the Phillies, we had some news over the weekend that I would like to talk about, and it's some good and some bad, more bad than good, but it's still something. So first we're talking about the main story here, which is Taijuan Walker. He will be starting the season on the IL with a shoulder issue. Not great for the Phillies. Taijuan was obviously signed to a huge contract in the offseason last year, a 4-year deal worth around $80 million. A deal most people were extremely perplexed about, to be completely honest. A deal people, including myself, were looking at and saying, why? Why? Like, why would you do that? And we've been proven right so far. He wasn't very good with the Phillies last year, and he was pretty awful in spring training as well. And now we're starting the season on the IL, so isn't even pitching reliable innings for the Phillies. So contract has not turned out great, and I still don't know why they gave it to him. I understand they saw something in one of his pitches where they thought if you throw that more, you can be an amazing pitcher. Hasn't worked out so far, I'd say, so that's not great if you're a Phillies fan or you're Dave Dombrowski, who is believing in Taijuan Walker, but I don't think this deal was ever going to work out, really. I still don't know why they gave it. There were so many other good options. Giving him 4 years as well, and at that clip, like that was crazy to me. So not a good deal. So with Walker being on the IL, it does raise a lot of questions for the Phillies rotation right now. I think there were some questions before, especially with the back end. You had Christopher Sanchez. Both players were kind of question marks. Sanchez because he's never had the full opportunity to start really in a full season, and with Walker, he's struggled a lot, so that's something that isn't great if you're a Phillies fan. Now, the top three of that rotation, of course, is amazing. You have Zach Wheeler, you have Aaron Nola, you have Ranger Suarez. Nola's kind of a question mark, not really a question mark, but something you want to watch out for during the season. Someone you want to watch out for during the season, I'd say. He didn't have the best season last year and just got a huge contract from the Phillies, so if he doesn't perform again, we might have to look at this as that's just who he is right now. So I think that is someone to watch here if you are a Phillies fan and just see what happens with him. So that's something to see here and see what does happen with Aaron Nola and the Phillies. But after that, I mean, of course, Zach Wheeler, top 3 pitcher in baseball. Ranger Suarez, really, really good. Christopher Sanchez, a good depth guy here, elevating to a starting role because of some issues in the starting rotation, because of some guys you let walk. So I think that's another guy you have to watch, see what does happen with him. So overall, I don't think the Phillies are in for a entirely awful rotation with Walker being out. Again, it's not good that he's out, but he's not that good anymore, I'd say. I don't think he's going to bounce back, unfortunately. He's a very likable guy. He has a great personality. I think just seems like a good dude, but has not done well with the Phillies uniform on. So with him being out for a little while, however long it is going to be Spencer Turnbull as the 5 starter for the Phillies right now. Turnbull was a guy who was signed to a minor deal for the Phillies this offseason, coming over from the Tigers. I think he's a really good depth guy, and I think in a pinch he is a guy you can rely on for some starts, for some innings, and that's exactly what it is right now, a pinch. I don't think Walker's going to be out for too long. Now, it is a shoulder injury, so those could always elevate because it is your shoulder and you are a pitcher, but I don't think it should be that bad. Overall, I don't think it's going to be that significant for Taijuan Walker, and I think Spencer Turnbull should only be in for a little bit. So I don't think Turnbull's going to be the 5-starter for very long, but still not ideal for the Phillies right now. Right now, going into the season, your 4-starter is Christopher Sanchez. Not great. I mean, simply put, that's just not great. The top 3 of your rotation, very good. Yes, I'm not going to debate that, but just going deeper down, you don't have that much pitching depth with these 2 guys. Now, you have some guys in the minors. You have Andrew Painter, who is coming back from injury, and we're not really sure what his future looks like because of the injuries he has suffered. So that's a guy I think is a question mark for the Phillies right now. After that, you have Mick Abel, who is another question mark, top prospect with them, but we're not entirely sure how well he is going to perform, and how much he can perform with the Phillies if he does get called up. So he's another question mark. So they have some depth. It's just not, in my opinion, reliable depth. I think this could potentially tempt them to go after a veteran starting pitcher, maybe a guy like Jordan Montgomery. Now, there were a lot of rumors involving Montgomery over the weekend, which I'm going to talk about in my last segment, not involving him, but just a part of it. I didn't want to have another segment on Montgomery because at this point, who really wants that? I mean, at this point, just sign or don't sign. Like, we're not dying by every rumor now. Spring training starts. I mean, the MLB season starts this week, and you're not signed. So I think people just want to see him sign and don't really care about the rumors anymore. So when he does sign, I think it'll be in a week or so. I'll be talking about it. Believe me, it'll be my first story, but it hasn't happened yet, so we're not going to be talking about it. But I do think Monty makes a lot of sense for the Phillies. There have been just some overall rumors about the Phillies potentially being a sleeper team involved with him the entire offseason, so I think he could be a good fit there. I, again, think he brings a lot more depth. You would have a top 4 in your rotation of Wheeler, Nola, Montgomery, Suarez, and I mean, that's pretty incredible right there. I mean, that's a really, really good rotation. 3 really, really good starting pitchers. Ranger Suarez, another guy who's very, very good. So I think Montgomery could definitely be a fit. I think he brings a lot more depth to that rotation, especially now with the Walker injury. I don't know if he wants a long-term contract or not at this point. I think if he wants a long-term contract, he will not be getting that from the Phillies. I'll tell you that right now. But if he's willing to settle for a short-term contract like his counterparts, Chapman, Bellinger, Snell, Martinez, and Soler, I think he could potentially look to sign with a very good team like the Phillies. I think if he wants a long-term contract, it's more for a retooling team like the Red Sox. So overall, I do think Monty makes a lot of sense for the Phillies, going after him to get depth, making a run at him now with the Taijuan Walker injury. I don't think they do. Dave Dombrowski kind of hinted that they won't. But again, Dombrowski loves his stars, and I'd say Montgomery has become a star now because of what's happened with Texas, what happened with their World Series run, and him being a big part of that. So I think he could potentially be a big part there, and a really good guy to add to this rotation and be a big part of this Phillies team if they were to add Montgomery later. So I think potentially Montgomery could potentially be a fit, and definitely makes a lot of sense for them. After that, some more exciting news. They extended Matt Strahm on a 1-year deal with a club option for 2026. Strahm came over from the Red Sox and was a really good lefty reliever with Boston. Then came to Philly and was really good there. They tried making him a starter, but it wasn't very successful, and he went back to his roots being a lefty reliever and was good in that role. So that's what I think. That's in the end what I think happens with him. I think it's going to be interesting to see now if they do try and make him a starter again, if the Walker injury is serious. I don't think they will because it's kind of failed before, and if I'm them, I'm looking at the younger guys to make starts like Christopher Sanchez, like Mick Abel, like Andrew Painter. I'd rather not have a 30-year-old reliever who you tried making a starter once and it failed and trying to make him a starter again. Just personally, I think that you try and get the younger guys involved if there is a serious injury. Again, I wouldn't go after Strahm, but overall, I think the re-signing for the Phillies is good. I think it's a good extension. I think Strom's a really good reliever. I think is one of the better lefty relievers in this game, and I think it's just the Phillies adding more and more to that bullpen, keeping guys around. They already have a great bullpen in there with him, with another guy like Jose Alvarado. So I think they have a really nice bullpen core. Gregory Soto as well, like I mentioned. I'm sure there's other guys I'm forgetting. So I think that Strom is a good extension by the Phillies and a guy that I would like to see them keep around for their core, and I think really does fit there. After that, we have more bullpen injuries, more bullpen news for the Phillies, and that is about their righty reliever Orion Keckering. Keckering came up last year, showed off his great fastball and slider combo and some other pitches as well that were really nice, and became a really good reliever for the Phillies. Became one of their lockdown guys even as a rookie in the playoffs, especially for them. So has become a big part of their bullpen core going in. He is going to be starting the season on the IL with the flu, actually, something that does not happen very often. Apparently, Keckering was fighting really all of camp with the flu, and because of that, won't be ready for opening day and has to build himself up again to get back from it. So it's not an injury, really, just a sickness that went on for a long time, which is something you don't really ever see. So that was definitely interesting. That's definitely interesting that he's out with the flu. Not something I see much, so that's something to watch here. If the flu does affect him, I can't believe I'm saying that, but if it does affect him going into the season and affect his abilities, and if he does kind of falter because of that at the start. So that's definitely something interesting to watch. Again, the flu is a serious thing. I don't want to make it seem like it's not, but for a baseball pitcher, you're kind of expecting an arm injury or a shoulder injury, an elbow injury, something like that. You're not really expecting the flu to keep someone out for the start of the season. So that's something I hadn't really seen for a little while, not something I remember seeing. So just an interesting story there, and it will be interesting to see how Keckering does come back and how much of a part he does play in this Phillies rotation, in this Phillies pitching staff and bullpen. Definitely not rotation because he is not a starter. So, yeah, just the Phillies news I did want to talk about. There were a lot of stuff going on with them over the weekend, kind of surprisingly. A lot of stuff's happening in their division, especially with the Mets signing J.D. Martinez. So maybe they wanted to steal the spotlight for a day, but wasn't really with positive news. Again, Taijuan Walker's hurt, Orion Keckering's hurt, and they extended Matt Strom, which is one piece of good news. Just going over a tiny bit, Walker I don't think is a huge deal. I kind of think he's done anyways. I don't think he has much left in the tank. I don't think he's shown much, especially during spring training. I don't think he's that good anymore. So overall, I wouldn't be too worried if I was a Phillies fan. This is not a guy that I think is going to be a huge part of your team. So yeah, not a huge deal if you're a Phillies fan. And overall, I wouldn't be too worried. So that's about Walker. Strom, good re-signing for them. A guy, if I was a Phillies fan, I'd love to see be part of this bullpen core for a long time. So good job by them. Keckering shouldn't be a big deal. They have a lot of bullpens out for the Phillies. They were just recently ranked number one bullpen in the league by MLB.com. So they do have a lot of bullpen depth. A lot of changes from a long time ago. I mean, they had no bullpen in that 2019 season, which is one of the main reasons that they did fail when they signed Bryce Harper. So they've done well now, and overall, it's been really good for them, and I'm glad to see them turn it around, and I'm glad to see them finally have a competent bullpen. So that was the second segment here. We're going to go to our third segment, which is going to be about the Shohei Ohtani and Ippei situation. I'm finally making a full segment on it just to get out my thoughts, personally, what I think could be going on with this. Again, it's kind of more of a legal situation than a baseball situation, but it involves the best player in baseball, so that I did want to talk about it and did want to just share my thoughts on it. So we'll be talking about that, and we'll be going to our second break, and we'll be talking about it more after. So thanks. See you then. Bye.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, we are back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, bringing you our third segment, which is going to be talking about Shohei Ohtani and his interpreter, Ippei, and the situation that is involving them that has happened in the past few days. So, obviously, to start off with, we all know of what happened. It came out mysteriously in the middle of the day that the Dodgers had fired Ippei, Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, for many, many years, and it was kind of a shocker. Now, it usually wouldn't be big news if a team did fire an interpreter. I think that's something that happens behind the scenes all the time. They have a hard job, so I think if they mess up a few times, they are kind of out of there. So I don't think it's necessarily a huge deal, again, if they do fire an interpreter. But why was this a different story? It was a different story because Ippei and Ohtani had been friends for a long time. They came over when Ohtani came over from MPB. He brought over Ippei to be his interpreter. He didn't let the Angels bring him an interpreter. He brought his guy. So overall, that's really why it's big news. They are friends. They've been friends for a long time. It's very public they are friends. There's so many clips on Twitter and social media of them chatting in the dugout, just being real good friends. And it was a shocker when they fired him. So we tried diving deep into it. We found out shortly after that it was because of some gambling issues. The first thing we heard was that Ippei transferred money from Ohtani's accounts to pay for his gambling debts in an illegal gambling ring. Now, the first thought with a lot of people was a few things. One, how would an interpreter rack up a $4.5 million gambling debt? I'm sure he gets paid nicely. I'm sure he does, believe me. But I don't think he has enough money for $4.5 million. Second of all, how does he have access to Ohtani's financials? That's another strange thing I think a lot of people were wondering. So there's a lot of stuff that weren't exactly right with the situation. And it came out later that kind of seemed like something that Ohtani's lawyers wanted you to believe. And they wanted you to believe that Ohtani was fully a victim and didn't really know what was going on. And with a lot more stuff coming out, we see that Ohtani kind of knew about it and that he did it for Ippei and these kind of situations. Ippei talked about it, and he talked about how it is all his fault, which I think is true. Overall, I personally think what happened was, this from my outside point of view, by the way, I don't have sources within the Dodgers organization or with Ippei or with Shohei. Just some guy from New York who talks about baseball. I don't have sources. If I do have sources or I get a scoop, I'll tell you guys up front, and I'll say if I get this wrong, I get it wrong. But here's what I'm hearing. But I don't think I have that. But with what I personally think happened was Ippei has a very bad gambling problem. He got into some illegal gambling rings, got into debt, and was kind of scared because you're getting into illegal gambling debt. That's not a great thing, I'd say. And he asked his good friend Shohei to pay him out of the gambling debts because, as we know, Shohei has a lot of money. I don't think anyone's really going to be debating that here. He gets paid handsomely for his services, as he should. We are the best athlete in the world. I don't think there's really any debate about that. So I think Ohtani did it, and because he is his friend, and he told his lawyers, and the lawyers found out and said, okay, you shouldn't have done that. As much as it was a nice thing to do, and as much as it was a good thing for you to do, to bail out your friend, it's an illegal gambling debt, and that's a crime still, even if you don't think about it. So I think they then push the story of Ippei stealing money from Ohtani's accounts, and that he was overall the victim. I think Ohtani's a victim. I do. I think that Ippei overall did kind of trick him into giving him some money to pay off the debt because they are such good friends, but I think he knew what he was doing a little bit. Now, that was my personal opinion. That is still my personal opinion of what happened, but we've heard a lot of different news over the weekend now. The first thing that's kind of strange is that we learned Ippei didn't go to college, which is kind of strange. Now, if you looked in the Angels media guide for all these years, you saw Ippei in his picture, and you saw that his bio said he graduated from UC Riverside in 2007. And if a baseball reporter asked the school to provide records of him if he did go to the school, and the school then said they had no record of all of him ever going to UC Riverside. So, did he lie about going to college? If he did, that would be a big deal, and that would be a big offense, I would say, lying about your credentials to get one of the biggest jobs in baseball, I'd say, right now, being an interpreter for Ohtani. So, there's a lot of stuff we didn't know about Ippei, apparently. A lot of people think he's a pathological liar, and he's kind of a sociopath. I think that's kind of overreacting, but there are a lot of stuff going on with him, and a lot of people are forming opinions about him. So it's just a lot of different stuff going on with the situation, a lot of different sides going back and forth with what happened and all this. So, excuse me. Overall, what I said is what I think happened, but again, we don't know because there's been a lot more information coming out. Apparently, Ohtani was visibly mad when he heard the story came out, and that was the first time he heard anything about that. So I don't know what's happening with really all this, but I'm just giving my outside perspective on it, kind of update on it. A lot of people think Ippei was the fall guy, and Ohtani's some massive sports gambler who had his friend take the fall for him. I don't think that's true. If it was true, believe me, it'd be a hell of a 30 for 30. I'd say that. It'd be a great 30 for 30. But I think people are kind of bored and kind of just wanting baseball news to start. As you see with me, I mean, some of these segments I'm kind of reaching, There's not much going on with baseball right now, but I'm trying to give out the best content I can, and Tuesday's going to be really fun. Wednesday's going to be fun. Thursday's going to be fun because that's when everything heats up, and that's when it's my time to shine for baseball opening day. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, that's really just what's going on with Ohtani and his interpreter. Just the updates that I have him happening right now. Ohtani was supposed to speak to media today at 5:45 Eastern, and he then took that back and is now saying he will have a statement provided to us by him, which is probably going to be from his lawyers, I'd assume. So that was another thing that's in this case. So overall, just a lot going on with Ohtani and a lot going on with the interpreter, and just not I don't think how anyone imagined Ohtani's career with the Dodgers would start, and not how I'd say he wanted it to start, believe me. So not great. But overall, the effect on the Dodgers I think this could have is not that high. Is it a distraction? Yes, it is a distraction. Absolutely, it's a distraction. When you're having your franchise guy hold a press conference, the guy he gave $700 million to, right after a few weeks after he made his debut, I don't think that's a great sign, and I don't think it's very good. But I don't think this is a huge thing that should affect them on the field. Again, I think it'll distract them because it is a news story that is very popular, is going to be very televised because it is Ohtani, and he is playing for the Dodgers now. He's in L.A. He was in L.A. before, but he's with the real L.A. team now with the Dodgers. Sorry, Angels fans, but that's how it goes. I think he knew what he signed up for, and he knew with the media, but I don't think he expected his good buddy and translator to be fired because of stealing money. So it's definitely an interesting thing, and it's definitely an interesting situation to watch. I don't think anyone was expecting this. I'm very, very intrigued to see what he says during the press conference at 5:45. I'm definitely going to be watching, and I'll probably make a short about it tonight and hear what he says. So it'll be on this channel, GSMC Sports Network and GSMC Podcast Network, if you do want to check that out. So I don't think the effect should be too high on the Dodgers and the overall team morale because of this. Is there going to be an effect on Ohtani? I think there could be. I think you have Ippei, who's kind of his everything in baseball and in life. You come to a country where you don't know the language very well, and he's kind of your middleman for translating everything. He's the guy that everyone communicates you with. So that's definitely something to watch, see if that does affect him, because he doesn't really have a middleman now to talk to people. So I don't think it should be a huge deal. Everything I've seen from him is that he knows how to speak English relatively well. He's not a scholar at it any means, but he knows how to speak the language, the basics of it. And I'm not judging him at all. Believe me, I know no other languages but English. So anyone who can learn even some other languages at all and speak it well, they have my full respect. And I think Ohtani's done super well with that. And has done really impressive with that. He's just an overall smart guy, and I think will do fine if he has to speak English himself. Maybe not for big, long statements, but I think he definitely knows the basics. And again, good for him, because learning another language is very, very hard. I talked about this with one of the younger players a while ago, with Yamamoto. I talked about it with how that's a factor you have to look towards with players coming over. So definitely going to be very interesting to watch, see how it does affect Ohtani and what does happen with him and Ipe, and overall what the effect is going to be on Ohtani, and more news we hear about this in the future. So we also saw Ohtani's names appear on some illegal wiretaps because he was sending money, I believe. So that's another thing that's interesting. See if he does get involved with the legal part of this case. I think Ipe will, and I think he's probably going to be in some legal trouble, but we'll see what happens there. It's apparently Ipe's own wife unfollowed him on Instagram, which is kind of crazy. So I don't think he's going to be in it for a great part of his personal life, but that's not for me to talk about. I'm sure to talk about the baseball side of it. So overall, that was my thoughts on the Ohtani Ipe translator situation, yada, 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 all that kind of stuff. It's a very delicate situation. It's a very interesting situation, and it's something we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot more about in the coming weeks and especially months, just seeing how this whole thing does unfold. I don't think it's how anyone imagined Ohtani's tenure with the Dodgers would be starting. I don't think it's how Ohtani imagined his tenure with the Dodgers would be starting, but it's baseball, and especially it's life, and crazy things always happen. So these are the things that do end up happening here and are what is going on. So yeah, we'll be updating the situation as it does go on in the future. Definitely, I can guarantee that, and we'll be talking about it then. So yeah. All right, so that was the end of my third segment. We're going to go to our fourth and final segment, which is going to be about some general news around the league, some news stories I did want to talk about. Just, again, I do this usually as my last segment, always some news I thought was notable, but not notable enough to be its own segment. So we'll be talking about that there, and we'll be talking about that now. So thanks, and see you then. Bye. Ooh, there we go.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, we are back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, bringing you our fourth and final segment, which is going to be about some general news stories around the league that I did want to touch upon. Some stuff I did think was notable, and that happened over the weekend. There's a lot because it's been 3 days now. So, yeah, let's get straight into it. So, the first one here is going to be about Jared Jones and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Jared Jones was a top Pirates pitching prospect, and he has made the Pirates opening day roster. He is going to be their fifth starter. This is something I know a lot of Pirates fans are very excited about. I've seen them all over social media clamoring for this guy, really hoping he would be the five starter. He performed really well in spring training. He's shown a lot of tools to be a guy for the Pirates in the future, to be a big part of that rotation and their young core, especially their pitching core. They have a lot of young hitters, I'd say, but not many outstanding young pitchers, guys who I think can really make a difference. So I think it's good for them to finally have one. You can see in Jared Jones, he has an electric fastball, can throw 100 consistently. And again, I'm excited for him to make the opening day roster. I'm always a fan of giving younger players opportunities, especially on teams who are, frankly, in the situation of the Pirates, where they're rebuilding very clearly. So I'm very glad Ben Cherington and the Pirates made the right decision to get this guy on the opening day roster, make him a big part of the team next year, and make him a big part of the pitching rotation. If he struggles, you're going to send him back down, but he showed a lot during spring training, showed a lot of tools, and showed a lot to become a guy who can be a fixture in that Pirates rotation for a long, long time. So excited for him, excited for Pirates fans, because again, they've been clamoring for this. They've been really, really wanting it. They don't get a lot of what they want in baseball and in sports with being a Pittsburgh sports fan, but I'm glad they got this, and glad Jared Jones is making the roster, and I'm super excited to watch him, honestly. Again, his fastball is super electric, and he has great stuff. So overall, exciting to watch and exciting to see what happens here. Jesse Chavez was released by the White Sox over the weekend, and would you know it, signed with the Atlanta Braves. This is just an incredible story that people talk about for good reason. I mean, this guy just keeps going from the Braves to another team, to the Braves to another team. Like, it's just insane what Alex Anthopoulos and the Braves' love affair is with this guy. It's just such an incredible story, and so interesting, honestly, about Jesse Chavez. Going over Jesse Chavez's career with the Braves and his history with the Braves. He first pitched with them in 2010. Then he went back to them in 2021. Then signed with the Cubs, who traded him to the Angels. The Angels then released him, and then he re-signed with Atlanta, getting released. So he went back there. He then signed with Atlanta last year as a starter, signed with the White Sox this year, got released, and then re-signed with Atlanta. So the Braves love him, I'd say. I think it's pretty clear. Also, he has not had good careers with really anyone else but Atlanta. He's had pretty high ERAs with every team he's played for in the past years, the Cubs and the Angels. But with Atlanta, he has always a really good ERA. It's just incredible, their love affair with him, and the fact that he's always so good with them. I don't think it's that they have some kind of crazy magic like a lot of people think. I just think they know how to use him. I think that's the reason they love him. They know how to use him well. They know his roles. They know what he's good at. They know what he's not good at. They know his pitches. They know his strengths and weaknesses, like I said. So I think it's just another showing of how smart the Braves organization is, how good they are, and it's just so funny, this Jesse Chavez situation with the Braves. I'm sure he'll get traded at the deadline. Some team will DFA him after like 5 appearances, and he'll re-sign with the Braves. I'm sure that will happen at the trade deadline. So yeah, it was reported that he had a major league deal with the Twins, but obviously that was false, and it came out. And the Braves announced that he re-signed with them for the MILB roster and the spring training camp. So it'll be fun to see if he makes the opening day roster. I'm sure he will, because the Braves just love this guy. So just such an interesting thing, in my opinion, and just something that's really funny. Some Yankees news here. The Yankees have placed DJ LeMahieu on the IL. We talked about this, I think, last episode or the episode before that, just last week sometime, that he was likely going on the IL with an injury. Not a huge deal, as I think they have a lot of infield depth, especially for third base, which LeMahieu would probably play. They have some young players who could potentially fill in there, like Oswaldo Peraza. Now, apparently they don't really trust him, and he kind of lost his way within the Yankees organization. So he could potentially not be their starter, but I think for now he will be. It could go to Oswaldo Cabrera. They could sign someone. I know some Yankees writer floated the idea of trading for Gio Urshela after he signed with the Tigers, because he's not guaranteed the third base opening day job, and he would be right now with the Yankees, would play for them at third base, and then if he's good, I'm sure would stay there, or would move to the bench and be a part of the Yankees team again. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fill this role, but I would assume it'd be Peraza or Cabrera, one of the younger guys. But it could also be one of the bench guys that comes up and plays a big role with them. So overall, it's going to be interesting to see how they fill this role, but I don't think it's a huge deal for LeMahieu to be out, and I don't think it's going to be a huge effect on them. Lewis Heel, he was named the Yankees 5-starter by Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman. A really nice story here. This guy has battled injuries for the past few years, but came up this year in spring training, diced people up, was electric, was throwing a great fastball, has some great off speeds to counter with it, so has just done really well, and has been a really good pitcher for the Yankees, and I'm glad they named him the 5-starter. I think he's definitely earned it, and I think he is a guy that Yankees fans can look towards in the future of that rotation and see him being there. I think this kind of is, though, a last-ditch effort for him. Like I said before, I think he is going to be part of the rotation for a long time, but I think this is his year to prove it. If he's not good this year and he gets injured again, I think they could move on from him. But he has such electric stuff. He's such an electric player. I think he can kind of fill in that Luis Severino role of being a guy who shows a lot of emotion, has electric stuff, and I think Heel is going to be a great pitcher for the Yankees and a guy I'm super excited to watch going forward and seeing what can happen with him. Jordan Montgomery apparently has 2 long-term offers on the table. This is from MLB reporter Jim Bowen. Jim Bowden is not the most reliable, I'll say. He used to be a general manager, but he's not the most reliable, not a guy I'd count on with amazing sources. So I'd probably take this with a grain of salt. But again, if it is true, good for Montgomery. I'm sure he'd rather take a long-term deal than a short-term deal, but I'm not sure where his head's at right now. I really couldn't tell you. I think he gets a long-term deal, and I talked about it last episode on Friday, but I think he gets it from the Red Sox. So I think the Red Sox could be a team to watch for Montgomery. He also floated the idea of the Diamondbacks and Orioles, which would be interesting because both teams haven't really been mentioned with Monty. Diamondbacks could make sense, of course, as they just lost their big-time starter, Eduardo Rodriguez, who is going to be out for a little while with a lat strain, could fill in that number 3 role. And when he comes back, you could have one of the better rotations in baseball in Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, Jordan Montgomery, Brandon Pfaadt. That would be an incredible rotation. So it would be interesting to see if Montgomery does sign there. I don't think he will, but it was an interesting thing floated there. The Orioles were also floated by him, kind of in the same boat as the Diamondbacks, are having a pitching injury. Kyle Bradish is hurt, who's their clear number 2. After Corbin Burns, of course, who is the ace. So Monty could provide a lot more stability to that rotation. He's very familiar with the AL East, of course, pitching with the Yankees, and I think would be a nice signing for the Orioles. Overall, I still think he goes to the Red Sox, but it was interesting to hear he has 2 long-term offers on the table, apparently. Again, take him with a grain of salt because it is Jim Bowden. He's not the most reliable guy, but he at least knows what he's talking about a little bit, so I'm not going to fully dog on the guy and fully say that he has no idea what he's talking about. So there's that. After that, we have the Twins. They placed Justin Topa on the 15-day IL. Not great if I'm a Twins fan. They've already had a lot of pitching injuries, especially bullpen injuries. You've had Johan Duran placed on the injured list, Caleb Diobar placed on the injured list, and just Topa's just another guy who's adding to that. I think the Twins' bullpen is one of their strong suits. I think with Johan Duran, with Caleb Diobar, with Topa, I think they have a lot of good bullpen arms, and them losing 3 guys who are valuable parts of that bullpen is not a good start to the season. Rocco Baldelli and the general manager over there did mention that they could be looking for some guys who get cut from camp and could be additions there. I think that would be a wise move by them. I do think they need some bullpen help right now just to bridge the gap until these guys do come back. I think Diobar is a great setup man and a guy who pitches really well against lefties. I think Topa is a really, really good reliever as well, a guy who broke out last year in Seattle and is going to be a very, very good pitcher. So, again, not great news for the Twins, but I don't think it's so horrible that it's affecting my choice of having them first in the AL Central. So we'll watch how this goes, and we'll see what happens there. The Phillies, they traded Jake Cave to the Rockies over the weekend. We had 2 separate segments on the Phillies and the Rockies, so that's kind of nice. Cave didn't really have a spot with the Phillies. He didn't win the 4th outfield spot role. That went to Christian Pache. So I think they wanted to trade him, give him a better opportunity, and the Rockies probably provide that. He could probably start there because they don't have that many players because, as I said, they're not that good. This is more of a positive Rockies episode because I had a full segment on them and how they're improving with the organization and their farm system. But still, I don't want to dog them too much, but still, I think that is true. So I think Cave is a nice addition for the Rockies, a good veteran guy in the clubhouse to have, a guy who provides some versatility in the outfield, could play first base, is a solid hitter, could be a good trade deadline chip for some team who wants a 4th outfielder or a guy who can fill in a backup first base role or a backup DH role. So will be interesting to watch and see how Cave performs with the Colorado Rockies and what is going to happen there. The Blue Jays, they have selected Daniel Vogelbach, and he will be on their opening day roster. Always love this. Vogelbach's one of the nicest guys in baseball, one of the coolest guys in baseball. Of course, a legend with his appearance. So I think this is a great move by the Blue Jays, and with him being, aside from being kind of a meme player, quote-unquote, he does provide a valuable asset. I think he walks a lot. He hits well. He's a good bench bat, in my opinion, a guy to bring up in a pinch or a guy who can start from day to day. I don't think he should be your starting DH every day like the Mets had it, but I still think he is a valuable guy to a team, and I think he does provide some valuable stuff to the Blue Jays. So overall, I do like this. The Nationals had some veterans make their opening day roster, having Matt Barnes, Jesse Winker, and Eddie Rosario make it. All these guys are kind of washed-up veterans, guys who are kind of looking for one final chance, and I think the Nationals provide them with that. low-risk environment, and they'll be making some money. So if they do flame out a little bit, it's not the biggest deal. So I think Winker and Rosario have a good chance to bounce back. Not really sure about Barnes. He's been bad for a few years now, but I think Winker and Rosario are nice signings by the Nationals, and I think, again, were good buy low moves. And if they are potentially good, you could extend them and make them a part of your young core that is coming up, or you could trade them at the deadline and get some good prospects. So it'll be interesting to watch how these guys perform with the Nationals going forward and what is going to happen with them. Finally, Miguel Andujar, a guy I talked about as a spring training breakout player, has a torn meniscus and will miss 4 to 6 weeks. In my opinion, this is a big blow for the A's, definitely. This is a guy I watched spring training, watched him perform really, really well, thought maybe he could find a home in Oakland and find somewhere to finally live up to his large potential that he had with the Yankees when he was a top runner for Rookie of the Year for those years with Ohtani. So it's definitely a negative for the A's here, and not something I'd want if I was an A's fan. But I think we'll be back relatively soon, around probably a month or two, and I'm really interested, honestly, to see if he can perform like he did in spring training and kind of get his career back on track. So I think he had a lot of potential coming up, and it would be really fun to see him fulfill that potential with Oakland. So that is my show for today. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can follow us anywhere you can get content and updates: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those places. So make sure you can get content and updates there. Tomorrow will be a special episode. I'll be having an interview with Eric from the GSMC Wrestling Laureate Podcast. He does really great work over there. So if you are a WWE or wrestling fan, make sure to watch out his show, 8 p.m. Western and 11 Eastern, and I guess 10 Central. So yeah, I think he does a great job over there, and I'm really excited to talk some baseball with him. It'll be a really fun episode, and I'm really excited to talk about that with him, and really excited to do that tomorrow. So make sure to check in there. So thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see what baseball throws at us. So bye, guys. See you later.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.